I think that most people don't realize why they became in that perilous state in the first place. And that's a story that I think needs to be kind of reiterated a few times, because it actually echoes what else is happening to other species as well. So the osprey is a very good emblem really for that kind of conservation.
Hello, my name is Sacha Dench, but I'm better known as the human swan. I'm also the UN's ambassador for the Convention on Migratory Species. This year, the charity I founded, Conservation Without Borders, is launching a new expedition to follow the flight of the osprey, an epic migration of 10,000 kilometres through 14 countries from Europe to West Africa. As a part of this, we're doing a series of podcasts to highlight the global stories and connections this bird makes, to help us see our complex and challenged world through the eyes of this incredible animal. In this episode, we catch up with David Lindo, the Urban Birder, mid-expedition. Whilst we are in the middle of Spain, the satellite-tagged ospreys are just behind us, and we're passing over David Lindo's current home of Extremadura. We speak to him about his love of this incredible bird, why he thinks it belongs back in his hometown of London, but also about his fears for the birds as they cross central Spain and Extremadura and into Africa.
David, thank you very much for taking time out to have a quick chat to us.
No, it's always a pleasure to talk to you, Sacha, and it's always a bigger pleasure to talk about the projects you're working on, especially this one, the ospreys.
Well, yeah, and we're kind of behind the scenes. We actually have to keep moving at the moment. We have Abby, who's currently filming out the window. We are in the Huelva region at the moment. Can I say a quick hello, Abby?
Hello.
And Mel and Jason. I'll try and Mel and Jason, can you do a quick hello?
Hello. Hi guys.
No, thank you. We're on the move. We are out trying to film different sites around Huelva, which is a site we expect one of the at least there are three ospreys with tracks on them are still alive, and we're expecting that at least one of them is likely to come across this region. We're trying to get through to the fish farm. There's a fish farm actually near in Doñana, which looks like at the moment the only site in all of Doñana that an osprey might be able to find fish. It's looking incredibly dry. Haven't managed to get through to them yet. And but here in RDL, we're hoping to film at least film the sites that they might come through at some point, and go to a rehab centre where birds of prey have ended up in the past. But anyway. Thank you for being supportive of this project from the very early days, David. Can I start by asking if you remember your first interaction or your first experience with an osprey?
Yeah, I was thinking about it today. The first time I saw an osprey, I was 13 years old, and actually on my first ever trip outside of London, I was off youth hosteling with a bunch of young kids, and one leader, this guy, which would never happen in this day and age, with stranger danger and all that sort of stuff. But this guy took us up to the Cairngorms. I remember we went to Loch Garten, and myself and one other person, a guy that I press ganged into birding a couple of years previously, were interested in birds. It's only the two of us. But I remember going to Loch Garten and seeing an osprey, and I did a lot of work beforehand trying to work out how best to tell what an osprey looks like. We eventually saw this large gull, and it turned out it was an osprey. Then thereafter, I saw ospreys sporadically, very sporadically. I think the next one I saw was maybe 10 years later. And that one was more memorable because I was in Dorset. I was at Portland or around that area. And again, I was always thinking to myself, I must look out for an osprey. Would I recognize one if I saw one, And we saw one, and it sort of fit the bill in terms of the jizz. It wasn't like a buzzard. It was, longer winged. It was like a large gull. We watched it. And then I think since then, I've seen them fairly regularly. I'm sure you may be asking me later, but I've seen them in all sorts of weird places, ranging from central London to seeing two last week on my tour in Extremadura. I'm pretty sure that one of them must be one of your birds.
Excellent. And when you were talking about seeing one as a 13-year-old, there wouldn't have been that many breeding pairs in the UK at the time.
No, because they were part. Obviously, the ospreys came back in the 50s or something, didn't they? So there was a very small population, and this was before the actual sort of reintroduction schemes. So it was a real special thing to see one, and we were lucky. I can't actually remember. I mean, I was 13, so I can't actually remember the exact moment. I just remember seeing one. I don't remember what it was doing even, but I got it in my notes because that's a good thing. I kept notes meticulously, so I knew that I saw one in October, in April that year, or whatever, May or June even. So, but yeah, obviously since then it's been a far more frequent thing. And plus, what's interesting is I've seen ospreys in every single, perhaps every single continent apart from Antarctica. And I've even seen the one in Australia, which obviously you come from. And Australia, I think, has been separated now, hasn't it? Because there's the Western osprey, and I don't know what that one's called, but it's quite interesting to see the variety of different sort of sizes almost, because some are quite small compared to the ospreys we see in the Western Palearctic.
I've seen them in Australia many times, not up close, so I actually couldn't tell you about the size difference. But I remember in this country first hearing actually there were so few ospreys and being really surprised because they're quite common and very comfortable around people. Where I've seen them in Australia, I've been by the coast, you'd be kind of driving speedboats underneath them and things. So yeah, I was pretty surprised. And again, they are a subspecies, but. The history of them across Europe is a bit shocking to a lot of people, I think.
Yeah, I think a lot of people don't realise the history, and I think, thanks to the work, the sort of self-reintroduction in Lochgarten and then subsequent introductions, I think people began to learn more. But I think that most people don't realise why they became in that perilous state in the first place, and that's a story that I think needs to be kind of reiterated a few times because it actually echoes what else is happening to other species as well. So the osprey is a very good emblem really for that kind of conservation.
Yeah, and there's been debates over the years about whether we might ever see the osprey back in the big cities and even back in London. Where would you sit on that?
I've been sitting all over it. I think it's a brilliant idea. I think, I've seen ospreys in other urban centres anyway, and they, as you say, they survive fairly well. I mean, I've seen them in Darwin in very urban scenarios, and I've seen them in other cities around the world. They can exist so long as they're, they can fish without being sort of pressured in any way by us, and also they can fish in reservoirs or lakes or even off the coast of the sea, in areas that aren't polluted and have good fish populations. Then that can happen, and I'd love to see a population in London, and I think it could, or any other city like London, because I think they could easily survive. I mean, I've seen them in London. I remember one of the most poignant times, well, two things. Once I was playing football in Hyde Park, jumpers down, I was in goal, and I let a lot of goals in because I often was birding at the same time. I'm looking up instead of looking at the ball. But on this particular occasion, I looked up and I saw an osprey. It must have been on the Longwater or the Serpentine, and it's flying just over the tops of the trees, heading, northwest. And I was like, and I think they scored at the time, but I didn't care because that was an amazing sighting. And then the other time, I'm walking in the middle of Covent Garden on a sunny sort of, weekday afternoon, and looking up, as I always do, and seeing an osprey fly over central London. That was amazing. And I'm thinking to myself, well, why can't that happen? Why can't we have ospreys, nesting at places like Walthamstow reservoirs or even the London Wetland Centre. It can happen. Why can't we do that? So I'd be all for it, and put me down. My name's on the list to be out there campaigning for that.
And you now are based out of Extremadura in Spain, but you lived in London for many years, right?
All my life, practically, yeah.
Yeah. And are you aware that have there been enough improvements in the state of nature in London that is a good indication that actually, like, where we have ospreys back?
I think there's been a steady increase in terms of, I think there has been a steady improvement, definitely, and also with the sort of creation of London Wetland Centre and the Walthamstow Wetland Centres and other such areas, there's been an increase in nature, which is great. And plus, obviously, as I said, I've seen ospreys, I've seen other raptors and other species generally in London some of them more than I have in previous years. My worry now is, unfortunately, we've got a new government who seems hell-bent on reversing all these wonderful, hard fought for advances. And I'm really worried. England, Britain is one of the most nature depleted countries in the world. And I don't understand why they want to deplete it even more. And to say to us, oh, don't worry, we'll put it back as we found it. You can't do that. These things take time to develop, and these habitats take time to grow. So that for me is one major issue. But I think if there was a project to reintroduce the osprey, or actually I'm sure there must have been in London or in the area of London in the past, to bring ospreys to the city, London, could be a great way of again having this bird as the champion of how we can actually create these habitats and have amazing birds like that living amongst us. I think the only problem would be that some of the anglers may not be happy, because they're not happy, for example, with the fact that cormorants have increased quite exponentially over the last 25 years. So they may see the osprey as competition, but I think the general public would love such an enigmatic bird as a symbol, a bird that you can easily see, once you go to the right places. And I think it's similar to the peregrine. People, when they find out there's peregrines in their cities, it's like, whoa, let's go and get telescopes and look at our peregrines, and let's get a webcam set up and all that sort of stuff. So I think the osprey can do a brilliant job in that respect as well. So I'm hoping that we can do that, get the osprey in some of our larger cities like London.
Where you are at the moment in Extremadura is actually pretty much on the migration path of many of the birds that will be crossing Spain. Can you your views, I suppose, on what sort of threats there might be to the ospreys, but also other migrating birds as they're crossing areas like central Spain?
Well, there's the problems, as far as I can see, increase. I mean, southern France is a problem, but they increase in Spain as the nearer they get to the coast, because once they get across the coast, across the Mediterranean, that's where the real problems start in terms of the massive hunting. But in Spain, I mean, I work very closely with a wild bird hospital called Amus, and Amus are in Extremadura in the Badajoz province, and they do amazing work, with injured birds, particularly birds of prey. And although I've never seen an osprey, it's normally imperial eagles and golden eagles and buzzards and stuff like that, red kites. There is a worrying situation where birds are being shot, and the ones that they have are the ones that have been found, obviously. And I don't understand why they're being shot. I mean, people do hunt in a region. Hunting is a pastime enjoyed, in inverted commas, by the more sort of higher echelons in society. And people come from the sort of Arabic states and from Italy and other places to come and shoot. ostensibly partridge, red-legged partridge, but the bird hospital have been finding more or getting more birds of prey with multiple pellets. I mean, there's one bird that got a short-toed eagle in their care, which they've had since they've opened, and that was they've had it for about 20 years now because it couldn't be rehabilitated. And similarly, some of the other birds like black vultures and stuff, they actually have them as breeding stock now because they can't be reintroduced into the wild. So it's just, it's something that has to be looked out for. The other thing is poisoning, and the other problem is also the electrical cables that birds fly into, and wind farms. It's got to a point that, for example, red kites in Spain, particularly in southern Spain, have dropped so dramatically in number that there's now a scheme to reintroduce the very birds that were introduced from Spain to the UK. Their descendants are now being sent back to Spain to help bolster the numbers of breeding birds. And there's been
the red kites are dropping because of poisoning or because of shooting?
All of those, all of the above. Poisoning, shooting, electrocution, and in places like Aragon in northern Spain, it's probably got the most amount of wind farms of any region in Spain. So they are colliding with those. I mean, at least in Tarifa and places like that, I think they turn them off when there's a high number of migration. So basically, there's all these threats, and there has been a feasibility, project done, and there's an ongoing education going on as well amongst the local populace in terms of saying, look, guys, these birds are migrating. Please don't shoot them all. They're important for the biodiversity. So that's going on, and it has been decided to reintroduce the red kites. So I was actually with some of the red kites from Britain, and I saw them fly off into the wilderness, hopefully to multiply and prosper. So, yeah, I think there are problems. But through the work that you're doing, for example, we just need to get the message out there that these birds are we need these birds. They're important to the environment as they are important to us. So, yeah, I think hopefully, we can get the message out more.
And I wonder if there are situations where, if hunters are going out to shoot at a time when migration is in full swing and they're at a kind of a bottleneck, and so they're seeing vast numbers and not realizing that those vast numbers are actually the entire population passing overhead in the space of a few days or a few weeks. I wonder if that is always clear to them.
I don't think so. I think, for example, when I speak to my colleagues who work in terms of surveying at Batumi in Georgia, that's an amazing migrational bottleneck for raptors. I mean, they get over 1 million raptors passing through in the autumns, and that was only discovered in the last 12 years or so. And prior to that, hunters were there shooting because all they think about is where they are. They don't think about the actual backstory of the birds they're shooting. And the conservationists there have had, I suppose, a better sort of success than they've had in Malta, whereby they've managed to sort of chat with the hunters, eat and drink with them. And now it's the case that, the hunters are almost embarrassed to shoot the birds. We still hear the shots, but, it's not as much. And I think it's one of those things where younger people are getting more savvy about all of this with social media and all that. And they kind of realize, hang on, this isn't the right thing to do. And also people are beginning to realize that you can make money from this. You can have ecotourism. People can come to your region and see all these amazing numbers of birds flying over. So I think, it can work that way. I mean, we have to get to basics here. We have to allow people to understand. We've got to talk in monetary terms in a way. This is worth this to you. If you don't shoot these birds, people will come visit the region and they will stay at your hotel. You've got to say it really in basic terms. And I think in Spain, that message is slowly getting through. I think actually more than slowly, it's actually trickling through quite a lot now, quite strongly. but more work needs to be done. And I think the work that you're doing is going to be one of those things that's going to really help.
And do you have any? I mean, I don't know how often you have traveled to countries further south of here where the birds are going. Do you have any particular concerns about birds once they've leaving the south coast of Spain?
Yeah, I do. I mean, the north coast of Africa is renowned for people putting up nets miles long, catching anything indiscriminately, and tape luring birds in fields and just killing them. It's just awful.
Is that for food? Is that for food? Is that for taxidermy? Is that for fun?
I think it's, again, all of them. I think predominantly there's this black market going on when it comes to especially smaller birds for restaurants and other places. And it is a bit of a mafia scenario in terms of there's lots of money involved in that. And on top of that, in places like Malta, there's people shooting because they want to have the best, example of the bird stuffed in their house. So I think it's a variety of different reasons, but the problem is that there's many birds being killed for no reason. If it's either for taxidermy or for food, there's other birds that are being killed anyway, and there's just far too many being killed. So I'm really, really worried about it. And I think also with some of the politically unstable areas in especially in the Middle East or North Africa, it's hard for the NGOs based there or the conservationists based there to make an impact, especially if people are having to do this because they've got no money, because of their failing economy. So, it's more than just, oh, you are a bastard for shooting these birds. Some people, they have to do it because they need to survive or they need to make some money. So it's quite a complicated issue, really.
And where there are political issues behind it, if there are issues where there's political strife, for some of them it seems it's hard to make it a political priority to make policy changes, whatever, to look after birds.
Yeah, exactly. But then it's all very well us sitting here talking about that. In England, in Britain, we have the same problem. It's dressed up differently, but it's the same problem. Hen harriers have been hunted to extinction in England. Other birds of prey are indiscriminately killed illegally, and I'm sure, ospreys have also been in that number in terms of being poisoned and what have you. So there's a massive problem, not just in those populous areas, but also back on our own doorsteps.
You mentioned that actually a little while ago. Do you want to clarify for anybody who doesn't know the backstory of the osprey and why it went, as good as extinct in the UK and many countries in Southern Europe?
You know what? I'm not au fait with the story, but as far as I know, obviously they were hunted to extinction, certainly in the UK. And people obviously thought that they were competing in terms of fish. With the population in UK, I believe that some birds came back to Scotland in the 50s and were starting nesting around Loch Garten. And that was the first record or the first time they'd nested there for a ton of, maybe 100 tons or something. And there's been a slow increase since then. Excuse me. And obviously there have been reintroduction programs going on, like in Rutland, for example, and other places. Some successful, some not so successful.
I just think, just for many people, the fact that the ospreys were driven to extinction, were actively driven to, I suppose, functional extinction in the UK and in Southern Europe, a lot of people almost can't believe that we could do that. And that was just over competition with fish and competition for fish and egg collecting to some extent. Once they were rare, if they start to come back and they're still rare, they in the past it became targets for egg collecting, which is a very bizarre hobby for somebody that doesn't do it already. But I guess what is interesting is that we have to keep taking a massive dose of reminding ourselves constantly as we go into areas that are poorer, where conservation is less of a priority, that actually the real root of the loss of ospreys has come from our end of the flyway, not the other end of the flyway.
Exactly, and I just think we need to look at the examples like the peregrine and the red kite and say to ourselves, we can make a difference and we can make it work, and we can have a magnificent bird of prey back, not doing anyone any harm, other than and just giving us enjoyment and watching this birding all. To me it's a no-brainer answer, really, no-brainer solution.
Thank you very much, David, for making time to have a chat to us. We're just at the salt flat, so I'd better go and get ready. Thanks very much.